Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Florup with C-TRAN, and we're here live for an online open house to talk about proposed service changes coming up in 2022 and 2023. I want to start by saying welcome to everyone who is joining us live on the C-TRAN Facebook page, or perhaps you're watching the recording afterward. Either way, thank you for taking the time to be informed, to make your voice heard, and for helping C-TRAN provide better service in Clark County. Now, today's event is part of a series of open house meetings that C-TRAN has hosted this summer, both in person and now online. Public feedback is a huge part of any significant change to our service, and your feedback is why we're here. Now, this time is a little different because we're talking about two sets of changes happening in September 2022 and January 2023. In September, we're making a series of minor changes to numerous routes. Many of those will be in the form of additional service on weekends. Then in January, we're proposing additional, more significant schedule changes on some routes to expand on those investments. Altogether, the changes add up to thousands of hours in additional service each year, and all of it is going to local bus service here in Clark County. So the January concepts are really where we're looking for your feedback. But before we get into the details, I do want to go into just a little bit of background. None of the proposals for January is final. Concepts can and do change based on the feedback that we hear from the public. And there are two additional open house meetings happening this summer, plus a public hearing at the C-TRAN Board of Directors on August 9th. The C-TRAN Board will give final approval to any changes likely in September. Now, to get into the specific concepts, I'm going to bring in Taylor Eit, who is C-TRAN's planning project manager. Welcome, Taylor.
Afternoon, Eric.
Thank you for being here. Now, as I mentioned, we want to hear from you, to all of you who are watching. If you're watching us live on Facebook, you can ask questions or share your thoughts in the comments of this post. Feel free to go ahead and drop them in now, and we'll get to them during our Q&A portion a little bit later. We've also set up an online comment form at c-tran.com that you can use anytime. We've heard from quite a few of you already, and there's still plenty of time to be heard. So with that, and without further ado, Taylor, go ahead and take us away.
Great. Thanks, Eric. And thank you all that are listening now or maybe listening in the future. We are very excited to be here today talking about a number of changes that will go into effect in September, as well as discuss some of the potential concepts that may go into effect in January. And really, at C-TRAN right now, we're working to keep Clark County moving as more people are beginning to return to transit. We are making changes to reinvest in local Clark County services, as Eric mentioned, to make your trips faster, more reliable, and to improve when and where service is available. Today, we'll be talking about the September 2022 service changes, which will go into effect on September 18th, 2022. And we'll discuss proposals for our January 2023 service change. But we'll go ahead and start with our September 2022 changes. In September of 2022, we'll be implementing several changes that are focused on reinvesting service locally. As I mentioned, these changes will take effect September 18th, 2022. They include additional Sunday trips, expanded weekday service, new service to 88th and Andreessen, and changes to express stops on the Portland Mall. We're proposing earlier and later trips on Sundays to many routes in response to rider feedback to accommodate earlier and later work shifts and other changes in travel patterns that we've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. These routes are shown here. You can see the list there on the left under additional Sunday routes or additional Sunday trips. Many of these routes will have the same Saturday and Sunday schedules starting in September, although routes 7, 72, 74, and 92 won't in September. We'll discuss a proposal to add additional service to those routes on Sundays in January that would match the Saturday and Sunday schedules. We're also making adjustments to schedules on many routes on both weekdays and weekends. We're hoping that these will help facilitate better transfers throughout the system, make trips faster and more convenient for you, our riders. It'll be important to consult your schedule before you are heading to the stop in September, because it is likely that your bus arrival time will change a little bit. In most cases, it will only be a minute or two different than it is now, but in some, such as with Route 92, we'll be changing the departure time from Fisher's Landing to help increase transfer opportunities. So that bus will run about 10 minutes earlier than it does currently. So it'll be important that you take a look at your schedule, not only on the 92, but also other routes to make sure that your bus is going to be there when you expect it to be and you'll be ready. We'll have detailed schedules for all of the routes posted online soon, and we hope that these adjustments will help speed up your trips, help operators stay on schedule, and better reflect our current traffic conditions. We'll also have a change to Route 78, providing service to 88th and Andreessen. The new service will help serve the employment and retail and other new development at 88th and St. John's, or 88th and Andreessen, and along 88th between Andreessen and St. John's. But let's go into a little bit more detail about that Route 78 change. The shift will provide new service to retail and employment on 88th Street, as well as Andreessen between 78th and 88th, serving Seton Catholic Prep, as well as a number of employment and other new developments along that area. We've heard from many riders that make the walk today from 78th and Andreessen to Costco, Home Depot, or other locations nearby that service to this area is very much needed. With this reroute, new stops will be available on Andreessen, 88th, and on St. John's at existing Route 25 stops. The shift will help improve transfers with Route 25, as you'll now be able to make them at a stop shared between the two routes instead of needing to cross the street. Service along 78th Street between St. John's Road and Andreessen will be discontinued in September. Our other significant change to stop locations that will occur in September will happen on the Portland Transit Mall. We're making changes to stop locations for routes 105, 105X, and 164 on the Portland Transit Mall. Both C-TRAN and TriMet routes serving Southwest 5th and 6th Avenues will see fairly significant restructuring to the bus stops they serve, particularly south of Burnside. This is to accommodate the launch of TriMet's frequent express service in September. We've worked with TriMet to try to identify stop locations that would be most convenient for our riders in relation to their existing stops. Beginning in September, boarding for all C-TRAN routes, the 105, 105X, and 164, will be at the same stop locations on 5th and 6th Avenue south of Burnside in the morning and evening, respectively. And you can see a map of those locations on your screen here. On 5th Avenue, that's at Morrison, Madison, and Harrison. And on 6th Avenue in the afternoon and evenings, that will be on at Market, Jefferson, Yamhill, and Oak. It's important to note here that the stops for Route 105 and 105X north of Burnside that were added in January will not be affected by this change, so you will still see your bus there as expected. As far as the schedules to express routes in September, we won't be making any significant adjustments to the schedules at this time. So that really wraps up the major aspects of our September 2022 service change. So we'll go ahead and move into the proposals for January 2023. As Eric mentioned, we're looking for your input and feedback on a series of proposed changes that would take effect in January of 2023. That feedback will be collected, incorporated into the service proposals that we're running through today, and provided to the C-TRAN Board of Directors for review. These service improvements are primarily intended to strengthen the urban quadrant structure of the C-TRAN service and improve our system design. capitalize on upcoming September 2022 changes that we just reviewed, particularly improving weekend span, quality of service, and transfers, and continue to improve connections and coverage for the smaller cities in Clark County. These proposals include increased frequency on select days for routes 74, 71, and 80, additional Sunday trips on routes 7, 72, 74, and 92 to match Saturday and Sunday service, and select expansion of the current in the Kamiswashugal and Port of Vancouver service areas. If approved by the C-TRAN Board of Directors, these changes and any necessary modifications that may occur as a result of this public feedback would take effect on January 9th, 2023. So we'll go into each of these a little bit deeper. We'll begin with increased frequency. We're proposing increased frequency on Route 71 on Saturdays. This is primarily in response to demand and to better align with the weekend frequency of other C-TRAN frequent service routes, such as the 37. In January, a bus would come every 20 minutes rather than every 30 minutes for most of the day. We're also proposing increased weekday peak frequency on Route 74 to help get riders to jobs, shopping, and recreation, and to align with the weekday frequency of other C-TRAN routes that provide service 7 days a week. During this peak period, a bus would come every 30 minutes rather than once an hour as it does today. We're proposing increased Saturday and Sunday frequency on Route 80 with a matched schedule on both of those days and increased operating hours to better accommodate growing demand that we're seeing along the route. The weekend schedule on Route 80 will be much more like its weekday schedule, with a bus coming every 30 minutes for most of the day. We're also proposing to introduce weekend service on Route 48 between 99th Street Transit Center and Junction Park and Ride in Ridgefield. Since the launch of the 48 in January of this year, we've heard feedback about the need for better connections between the current, which began weekend service in April, and the greater C-TRAN system on weekends. Speaking of weekends, we're continuing to improve on changes that are happening in September of 2022 by looking to match weekend service on additional routes that we can't put in place in September and need to build or are planning to build in January. This includes the 7, 72, 74, and 92, and these are in response to rider feedback to accommodate earlier and later work shifts and other changes in travel demand that we've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. This includes one evening round trip on Route 7, in addition to the one morning and evening trip that will be added in September 2022, one outbound morning trip, and one evening round trip on routes 72 and 74, in addition to the 1.5 morning and one evening trips added in September 2022, two evening round trips on Route 92, in addition to the one morning and one evening trips that will be added in September. The proposed trips will match the Saturday and Sunday and holiday schedule for these routes. And we're also proposing a slight expansion of the current. This includes introducing midday service to the Port of Vancouver to a single continuous span of 5:30 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekdays. We're also proposing to expand the Kamiswashugal service area farther west along Southeast 1st Avenue to Southeast 192nd, Southeast 1st Street and to 192nd Avenue to better provide access to Union High School, as well as nearby retail, employment, and new development that's occurring in the area. And with all of these proposals, as Eric mentioned, we want to hear from you. Your ideas and input on these proposals and others are always welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you at an upcoming open house, which you can see listed here, by providing feedback online, emailing us, or by mail. The next steps in our process leading up to the January 2023 service change include a public hearing with the C-TRAN Board of Directors on August 9th, potential board adoption on September 13th, and if adopted, the service would launch on January 8th, 2023. So with that, I'd love to bring Eric back and if we have any discussion or questions.
Thank you, Taylor, for that rundown of the changes that are coming up in September and then also proposed for January. So we'll get to our Q&A portion of the open house now, and I want to start with an important question that we often get in past service changes, and this one is no exception, and that's just generally, how does C-TRAN decide which routes to make changes on? And in this instance specifically, how did C-TRAN prioritize where to invest frequency or additional weekend trips?
That's a great question, and I think it's always important to help all of our riders and everyone in our community understand how we do go about prioritizing and deciding where changes will occur to service. We use a number of different metrics as well as rider input to make sure that we are prioritizing what we are hearing from riders, as well as allocating service to the routes that are showing the most need for additional service. So we incorporate a number of metrics through our service design standards that help us identify routes that are performing well and routes that may need adjustments to service in order to improve the way that they are performing, because we know that all of our routes are really important to their users. So we want to make sure that they are working as well as possible for them. And there are obviously a number of areas that we don't currently serve in one way or another. So those are places where we definitely look for public input to show demand and need for service to these areas.
Great. So we've got a few questions showing up in the comments already, which is great. Nicole says, excited for the new changes for C-TRAN. That's great to hear, Nicole. Thank you for sharing that feedback. Dustin asks a question about Route 7 and 47. He writes, will the scheduling changes with Route 7 make it easier to transfer to other routes, especially first trip to Van Mall? Also, are there any changes on the horizon to Route 47 as Battleground doesn't have commuter service to downtown Vancouver or Portland?
So for Route 7, at this time, we do expect that some of these schedule changes should make it easier for those transfers to happen. That's really been a focus of this service change system wide, is ensuring that we're able to make transfer opportunities more prevalent for all routes, really. And we know that for some of our earlier and later trips, as well as on weekends where service is running on an hourly basis, those transfers are really important. So this service change will improve transfers to and from the 7 for early morning trips. And in regards to Route 47, we don't currently have plans in September or January of 2023 to make changes to the routing of the 47 away from Vancouver Mall. Although this kind of feedback is very important to helping us make a determination about if that sort of routing is useful or needed for riders.
Great. And Sarah has left a comment with regard to the 47 as well. She writes, I agree that the 47 needs better connections to downtown Vancouver and Portland. It would be wise for C-TRAN to have the 47 come and go out of Fisher's Landing instead of Vancouver Mall, with the ability to transfer to and from Route 41 that would allow for that. Thank you for that suggestion, Sarah. That's really helpful feedback to have. As Taylor mentioned, a lot of these changes that are on the table now are based on feedback that we've heard in the past. So that's absolutely helpful for us to hear. If there's something on this list that you don't see that you would like to see implemented, that's still feedback we're interested in hearing as well. Taylor, anything to add to that?
I think you hit that on the head. You did a great job responding to that. We know that all of our riders within the C-TRAN service area are riding for different needs, and we use your feedback to help make sure that our service is working best for everyone that needs it. So yeah, thank you very much for that suggestion.
So I want to get to a couple of questions we received in advance of today's live open house and a few comments. Tom writes, I ride the 72 and any additional schedule on weekends would be a plus. That's great to hear as well. As Taylor mentioned, the 72 is one of the routes that is going to receive additional weekend service both in September and January. So thank you for that feedback. Jamin wrote on the Route 48, he says, please bring Route 48 further into downtown Ridgefield. So that's one, as Taylor touched on earlier, is going to be, it's proposed to add weekend service in January. And that's a relatively new route, having just started less than a year ago. Taylor, can you talk a little bit about the Route 48 in particular, and any future changes for a route that is fairly new based on the feedback we're hearing from riders so far? Think we lost your audio there for a second. There you are.
Pardon me.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Live video.
As we mentioned, the 48 is a brand new route, and typically when we introduce a new route, we will give that route a little bit of time to establish itself within the area that it's serving, especially when it may be serving a new area. And in conjunction with the 48, we do have current service in Ridgefield and La Center. And in case that wasn't enunciated well, I'm referring to the current, which, if you're not aware of, you can find out more information about on our website. It's a great new microtransit service. And that service really helps us understand the needs of riders in the Ridgefield and La Center area who um, may have different needs, such as going to downtown Ridgefield, going to A, or going to downtown La Center, among other places. And so we'll use that information along with some of your comments and suggestions to help make determinations in the future about how we can help grow and improve Route 48.
Excellent. Another comment we received in advance of today was from Kristen, who says, I am incredibly pleased with these changes. I rely on the 80 to get to and from work. Currently on Sundays, the last bus leaves before my shift ends, so additional evening buses would be greatly appreciated. I love the more frequent weekend schedule too. It can be challenging to get errands done on the weekend when you have to time things perfectly to avoid waiting for the bus for an hour. Kristen, that's great to hear. That's really good feedback. And as Taylor mentioned, that's really the benefit of adding that increased frequency and additional trips as well. So one question that's come up as well, kind of related to that, is just the importance of having a matching schedule on weekends. Taylor, you touched on that. A lot of these changes are going to bring us to the same schedule on Saturdays as we have on Sundays for many routes, which is not the case on every route today. What's the importance of having a matching schedule on weekends like that?
Well, I think that comment did a really great justice to helping answer that question. And historically, Saturdays and Sundays have had different schedules, and that's largely because in the past, people may have had different travel patterns on Saturdays than they did on Sundays, which may have necessitated a different level of service provided on those 2 days. And what we're seeing over recent years, and particularly since the COVID-19 pandemic, is a significant change in how people are traveling and when they're traveling. And that is suggesting to us, based on some of the ridership that we're seeing on Sundays for both early trips and late trips at the start and beginning of service, that high ridership suggests we are needing additional service outside of what's provided today. And by matching Saturday and Sunday schedules, it'll be hopefully much easier for our riders to understand and interpret schedules and meet their travel needs. So not only will those services now have the same um, span and number of trips on each of those days, but they'll also have the same schedule. So if you have a departure at 8 a.m. on Saturday, you'll now have a departure at 8 a.m. on Sunday, as opposed to 8 a.m. on Saturday and 8:30 a.m. on Sunday.
Great. Back to the comments section. Looks like Jody has chimed in and says, I wish the 6 had 2 buses on the weekends, which would be increased frequency. So that's great feedback to hear. Thank you for that, Jody. Another comment related to Express, which I know we touched on for September that we received in advance, has to do with service to downtown Portland. So just to reiterate, Taylor, the stop location changes that are happening on the Portland Transit Mall do not affect the schedule for the most part. We're not proposing any schedule changes for September on express routes, correct?
That is correct.
So one comment that we received from a few folks in advance was the question of what about weekend service on express routes? Taylor, can you chat a little bit about that as far as where we're at with that particular question?
Yes, thank you. And we have heard that there is a desire for weekend service on our express routes, and this is really where that public input is an important piece of how C-TRAN designs and implements future service changes. We heard that there is a significant desire to begin reinvesting our service into local Clark County, and that's what hopefully you are seeing in these next two service changes and the January service change proposals. And when we do have instances like our express routes where we may have alternative travel options for riders, such as the 65 to the red line for those that may take the 164, or the 60 to the yellow line for those that may ride the 105, we tend to prioritize the addition of service where there are not other alternatives. But that feedback that there is an additional need is really important and something that we will continue to evaluate moving forward.
Great. So as you mentioned, we're talking about both September 2022 and January 2023. And one question that's come up is, do these changes have anything to do with the Vine on Mill Plain, which is currently under construction and opening later in 2023?
That is a great question, because when we design changes to service at C-TRAN, we are designing them with the goal of helping improve the network in the long term, regardless of other more specific changes such as Mill Plain BRT. So while these changes are not specific or directly related to that new service, which will be coming online later in 2023 or in that rough time frame, we will begin to have open houses and public input and outreach once we are beginning to talk about specific related service concepts.
Great. So we're just about out of time and just about out of questions. So we'll bid Taylor farewell and thank you for joining us. Taylor, anything additional to add before we wrap up here?
I would say just thank you all for joining in and for submitting your feedback and your input. It's really critical to helping us provide the best service that we can. So thank you all, and thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Taylor. So thank you all for joining us. As we mentioned, that there is still time to provide comments if you missed the live version of this open house. The URL is there on your screen where you can find full details about all the changes that were discussed today for both September and January of 2023. As we mentioned, there are also a couple of additional open houses coming up next week. So please join us for those. Those details are also on the website. So with that, thank you to everyone for joining us today. As a reminder, those details are there. We're still accepting comments through August 9th. So there's plenty of time to weigh in if you haven't yet. So thank you for watching. Thank you for writing, and we will see you next time.